most dangerous man in
Who
Tokyo
hurt you?
didn't fear bullets,
Who
betrayal,
hurt
or
you?
blood, but a single bandage on the wrong face would bring him to his knees. The bandage on Naomi's face should have been just another detail. Another small thing Goro Majima, the most terrifying name in Tokyo's underworld, would ignore as he stepped through his penthouse, untouchable, unreadable, and unbothered by the world beneath him. After all, what were the bruises of a cleaning woman to a man who'd orchestrated the disappearance of CEOs, silenced politicians, and ruled an empire built on fear? But when Naomi flinched at the sound of his footsteps, something old and violent awoke inside him. Majima paused mid-stride, his expensive Italian shoes silent against the marble floor. He was a man who could order a man's disappearance with a single breath. A man who walked with the cold authority of someone feared by politicians and criminals alike. Boardrooms emptied when he entered. Grown men wept at the mention of his name. Yet the tiny strip of white gauze on Naomi's cheek, the trembling way she tried to angle her face away, stirred a fury he hadn't felt in years. "Who touched you?" His voice was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that came before storms, before buildings burned, before people vanished into Tokyo Bay. Naomi's fingers drifted to the bandage, and he watched the lie form on her lips before she even spoke. "It's nothing, Majima-san. I just fell." But when she stepped back from him instinctively, fearfully, something in his chest tightened with a dangerous snap. He had seen fear before. He had caused it more times than he could count. Fear was a tool he wielded with surgical precision, a language he spoke fluently in boardrooms and back alleys alike. But seeing it in her eyes, directed at him, that he could not forgive. And it was in that moment, one single trembling breath, that everything in Majima's life changed. Because Goro Majima had spent 30 years becoming a monster, and monsters didn't feel. They didn't care. They certainly didn't notice cleaning women, but he'd noticed her, and now someone would pay. Before we continue, if you're loving this story, show some love, like, and subscribe to Speak Black Stories. New stories drop every day. Naomi Brooks had perfected the art of being invisible. She arrived at the Majima penthouse at 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes early. As always, when the building was still caught in that liminal space between night and morning. The lobby security nodded without really seeing her. The elevator operator pressed the button for the 42nd floor without meeting her eyes. By the time she slipped her key into the private entrance, she'd already become what she needed to be. A ghost who cleaned away the evidence of other people's lives. The penthouse sprawled before her in cold, masculine elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Tokyo's glittering skyline. Everything was steel and glass, and sharp edges, no warmth, no softness. Nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here, which was perfect. It matched its owner. Naomi had been cleaning Majima's penthouse for 11 months, and in all that time, she'd seen him exactly twice. Both times, she'd kept her eyes down, murmured her apologies for the intrusion, and finished her work in record time. That was the arrangement. She cleaned while he was gone. He paid generously. No interaction necessary. She preferred it that way. Men like Goro Majima, men with that kind of power, that kind of cold calculation in their eyes, reminded her too much of the dangers she'd spent years trying to escape. Today, her face throbbed beneath the bandage. Naomi caught her reflection in the spotless kitchen window as she filled her bucket. The white gauze stood out starkly against her brown skin, covering the bruise that bloomed purple and yellow beneath. She'd been careful with the makeup around the edges, but there was only so much concealer could do. "It's fine," she told herself, the same lie she'd been repeating since yesterday. "He won't even be here. Finish quickly. Get to the second job. Pick up Maya from daycare. Just keep moving." Movement was survival. Stillness meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. Takeshi's hand around her throat, his voice low and threatening. "You think you can refuse me? You owe me, Naomi. You owe me everything." She pressed her palm against the cool marble counter, steadying herself. The sound of the elevator made her freeze. It was barely 7:15 a.m. Majima never came home this early. Never. The penthouse was supposed to be empty until at least noon, which was why she'd been scheduled for morning shifts. Her heart hammered as she heard the distinctive chime, then the soft mechanical hum of doors opening. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. The kind of footsteps that belonged to someone who'd never hurried for anything in his life because the world waited for him, not the other way around. Naomi's hands trembled as she reached for her cleaning caddy, already calculating escape routes. Could she slip out through the service entrance? No, too far. The bedroom? No, that would trap her. She settled for making herself smaller, angling her body toward the kitchen counter, hoping against hope he wouldn't notice her. The footsteps stopped. "You're here early." Majima's voice was smooth, cultured, with an edge that suggested English was just one of many languages he commanded. Naomi had heard rumors about him. Everyone had. The demon of Kamurocho, they called him. The man who'd unified 3 rival families before he turned 35. The kind of man whose enemies didn't just disappear. They were erased so thoroughly it was as if they'd never existed. "I apologize, Majima-san." Naomi kept her eyes down, her voice steady despite the panic clawing up her throat. "I'll finish quickly and leave. Look at me." 2 words. Simple, undeniable. Naomi's training warred with her instinct. She'd spent years learning to be invisible, to never draw attention, to never give men like him a reason to remember her face. But there was something in his tone, not quite a request, not quite a command, that made disobedience feel dangerous. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Goro Majima stood in the doorway between the foyer and the kitchen, still wearing his suit from whatever business had kept him out all night. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps late 30s, with sharp features and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His jacket hung open, revealing a black dress shirt, and there was something almost casual about the way he leaned against the doorframe. Casual, except for those eyes. They fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She watched his gaze track from her eyes to her cheek, where the bandage sat like a beacon. The air in the room changed. "What happened to your face?" The question was soft, too soft. Naomi had learned to fear soft questions more than loud ones. Soft questions came from men who knew they didn't need to shout to be heard. "Nothing, Majima-san. I fell." The lie came easily. She'd practiced it in the mirror. Clumsy of me. She tried to turn back to her work, to resurrect the invisibility that had always protected her. But Majima moved not toward her. Exactly. But enough to shift his position so she couldn't ignore his presence. "You fell." It wasn't a question this time. It was something else. Something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Yes, sir." Strange. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with the clinical precision of someone dissecting a puzzle. The bruising pattern suggests impact from a closed fist, not a fall. The swelling is consistent with a blow approximately 18 to 24 hours old. And the way you're favoring your left side tells me there are more injuries you're hiding. Naomi's blood turned to ice. "I work with violence, Miss Brooks." His voice remained conversational, almost pleasant. "I know its fingerprints intimately." He knew her name. God, he knew her name. "Majima-san. I really should finish." "Who touched you?" Each word landed like a hammer blow. His voice hadn't risen, hadn't changed in volume at all, but something fundamental had shifted. The pleasant mask had cracked, and underneath it, Naomi glimpsed something absolutely merciless. Her throat closed. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be anywhere but here, caught in the crosshairs of a man who made his living from violence. "No one," she whispered. "Please, it's nothing." But even as she said it, she took a step back. That single step, instinctive, fearful, changed everything. Majima's expression shuddered completely. For a moment, he looked almost wounded. Then that too vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating and infinitely more dangerous. "You're afraid of me." It wasn't a question. Naomi couldn't answer anyway. Her voice had abandoned her completely. "Good." Majima straightened, adjusting his cufflinks with deliberate precision. "You should be afraid of someone. Just not me." He walked past her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated. He paused at the doorway to his bedroom. "Finish your work, Miss Brooks. Take your time. I'll be making some calls." Then he was gone, leaving Naomi trembling in the cold kitchen, knowing with absolute certainty that she'd just made a terrible mistake. Because Goro Majima had noticed her, and men like him never stopped once they started paying attention. Majima made his first call before Naomi had even finished cleaning the kitchen. He stood in his bedroom, jacket discarded, phone pressed to his ear, as he watched the Tokyo skyline bleed into morning gold. The conversation was brief, conducted in clipped Japanese that would mean nothing to most people. But the man on the other end, Nishida, his most trusted lieutenant, understood immediately. "I need a background check. Complete. Everything." Name? Naomi Brooks. Late 20s, early 30s. Black woman, American accent. Works for elite cleaning services. Majima paused, his jaw tightening. "And Nishida?" "I need it in 2 hours, not 2 days." "Understood, Oyabun." The line went dead. Majima set the phone down with more force than necessary. Through the partially open door, he could hear the soft sounds of Naomi moving through his penthouse, water running, the gentle scrape of furniture being moved, the whisper of cloth against glass. Sounds he'd never paid attention to before. He should let it go, should forget the bandage, the flinch, the fear in her eyes. He had an empire to run, enemies to manage, alliances to maintain. The problems of one cleaning woman shouldn't register on his radar at all. But that step backward, that single, instinctive step away from him, as if he were the threat, as if he were the one who'd put that bruise on her face, had ignited something in his chest that felt dangerously close to rage. No, not rage. Something worse. Majima caught his reflection in the window and barely recognized himself. When had he become the kind of man who cared about the bruises on a stranger's face? He'd built his reputation on cold calculation, on the ability to make impossible decisions without flinching. Emotion was weakness. Attachment was vulnerability. He knew this, had lived by it for 15 years. So why couldn't he stop seeing the way her fingers had trembled when they touched that bandage? His phone buzzed. A text from Nishida. "Preliminary info. Incoming. Details to follow." Majima opened the attachment. Brooks. Naomi. Michelle. Age, 29. Nationality, American. Residing in Japan for 4 years. Visa status. Valid work visa. Employment. Elite cleaning services, primary. Part-time positions at 2 restaurants. Residence. Apartment 3B, Shibuya District. Low-income housing. Dependents. 1 daughter, Maya Brooks. Age 6. The information continued: credit score, banking details, rental history, all the digital fingerprints that proved a person existed. But it was the financial data that made Majima's eyes narrow. 3 jobs. Wages barely above poverty level. And yet her bank account showed regular withdrawals far exceeding what rent and childcare should cost. Money disappearing into nothing, week after week, with no explanation in the records. Someone was taking from her. Majima's phone rang again. Nishida, calling back faster than expected. "Speak." "Oyabun, there's a problem with elite cleaning services." Nishida's voice carried the careful neutrality of a man delivering bad news. "The owner, Takeshi Yamada, has connections to the Matsuda Gumi. Small-time loan sharking operation, some protection rackets. He's been investigated twice for labor violations, wage theft, harassment, intimidation of foreign workers. The Matsuda Gumi, a minor family that operated in the gray spaces where Yakuza influence met legitimate business. They were beneath Majima's notice normally, the kind of operation he'd crush without thinking if they ever stepped on his territory. Has anyone filed charges against Yamada? No. The complaints always disappear. Workers too scared to testify, or they vanish before it goes to trial. Nishida paused. You want me to dig deeper? Majima watched a woman who might have been Naomi's reflection move past his bedroom door, small, careful, trying so hard to be invisible. Everything, he said quietly. I want to know every person Yamada has ever threatened, every worker he's exploited, every yen he's stolen. I want to know what he eats for breakfast and where his children go to school. Oyabun. Nishida's tone shifted, concerned now. This is about the cleaning woman? This is about a man operating in my city who thinks he can put his hands on people without consequences. It wasn't entirely a lie. Majima had built his reputation partly on maintaining order, on ensuring that even the small-time criminals knew there were lines they couldn't cross. Violence against the vulnerable. Exploitation of workers. Targeting children. These things drew attention from police, from media, from the kind of public scrutiny that made business difficult. That was the logical explanation. The truth was something he wasn't ready to examine. I'll have a full report by tonight, Nishida said. Good. Majima ended the call and finally allowed himself to step out of the bedroom. Naomi was in the living room now, cleaning windows with mechanical precision. She'd tied her hair back, and he could see the careful way she angled her head to keep the bandage side away from direct light. Even in pain, even afraid, she moved with a quiet dignity that made something in his chest constrict. She must have sensed him watching because she froze mid-motion. I'm almost finished, Majima-san. Take your time. He moved to the bar cart, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey, despite the early hour. Tell me, Miss Brooks, how long have you worked for Elite Cleaning Services? Her shoulders tensed. About 8 months. And before that, different agency. It closed down. Convenient. Majima sipped his drink, watching her in the window's reflection. Your employer, Takeshi Yamada, is he a fair man? The cloth in her hand stilled completely. Yes, he's fine. Strange. Because I've heard rumors that Yamada-san has a reputation for being less than ethical with his foreign workers. Wage theft, intimidation, the kind of behavior that attracts unwanted attention from labor boards. Naomi turned slightly, and for the first time since he'd confronted her in the kitchen, she met his eyes directly. There was something desperate in her gaze, something that looked like a plea. Please don't make trouble, Majima-san. I need this job. I'm not making trouble. He set down his glass with deliberate care. I'm simply curious why a woman who works 3 jobs can barely afford rent. Where does your money go, Miss Brooks? Her face went pale beneath the bruise. That's personal. Is it? Majima moved closer, watching the way she fought her instinct to retreat. Or is someone taking it from you? Someone who knows you're vulnerable because you're foreign, because you have a daughter, because you're afraid that one call to immigration could destroy everything you've built here. He saw the truth in the way her breath hitched, in the tears that suddenly threatened at the corners of her eyes. Even though your visa is completely legal, he continued softly, even though you've done everything right, men like Yamada survive by making people believe they're more powerful than they are. They exploit that fear. They profit from it. Stop. Her voice broke on the word. Please, just stop. Majima did stop, but only because he recognized the edge of panic in her voice. He'd pushed too hard, too fast. Whatever was happening to her, she wasn't ready to trust him with it. Why would she? He was exactly the kind of man she should fear, powerful, dangerous, capable of violence she couldn't imagine. But he could be patient. Finish your work, Miss Brooks. He returned to his bedroom, leaving her shaking in the middle of his living room. I'll see you next week. As he closed the door, he heard her ragged breathing, the soft sound that might have been a sob. It took every ounce of discipline he possessed not to go back out there, to demand answers, to promise her protection she had no reason to trust. Instead, he picked up his phone and sent one more message to Nishida. Assign a team to watch her apartment. Discreetly. I want to know everyone who comes and goes, especially anyone from elite cleaning services. And Nishida? If Yamada comes anywhere near her or her daughter, I want to know immediately. The response came back within seconds. Understood, Oyabun. Majima looked at his reflection in the bedroom mirror. The expensive suit, the cold eyes, the face that had launched 1,000 nightmares. He'd spent 15 years becoming this man, this monster that people feared. Now he was going to use every bit of that monstrousness to protect one woman who wanted nothing to do with him, even if she never knew it, even if she continued to fear him, because the alternative, letting someone continue to hurt her, was something he simply could not accept. Not anymore. The ramen shop smelled like grease and desperation at 2 p.m. Naomi tied her apron with practiced efficiency, ignoring the way her ribs protested the movement. The bruise on her face had darkened overnight, turning the edges a sickly green that no amount of makeup could hide. She'd removed the bandage, too conspicuous, too many questions, and told anyone who asked that she'd walked into a cabinet. Most people didn't ask. Naomi-san, table 4 needs water, called Hiroshi, the teenage busboy who was kind enough not to stare at her face. On it, she moved through the cramped restaurant on autopilot, her mind still trapped in Majima's penthouse from that morning. The way he'd looked at her, the things he'd known impossibly, terrifyingly known about Takeshi and the money and her fear. Where does your money go, Miss Brooks? Nowhere good. That was the answer she couldn't give him. Every week, Takeshi took his cut before her paycheck even reached her hands. Administrative fees, he called it. Insurance. 50,000 yen that should have gone to Maya's school supplies, to their winter heating bill, to the new shoes her daughter desperately needed. Instead, it disappeared into Takeshi's pocket while he smiled and reminded her how easy it would be for someone to make a call to immigration, to suggest her visa paperwork wasn't quite in order. It didn't matter that her visa was legitimate. The threat was enough. The lunch rush blurred into early dinner prep. By the time Naomi's shift ended at 4:30, her feet throbbed and the left side of her body screamed with each breath. She changed quickly in the staff bathroom, pulling on jeans and a clean shirt, then caught the train to Shibuya. Maya's daycare closed at 6. Naomi had exactly 47 minutes to pick up her daughter, get home, and start dinner before her final job of the day, cleaning offices in a high-rise that somehow paid less than scrubbing toilets at Majima's penthouse. The daycare was bright and cheerful in a way that always made Naomi's chest ache. Colorful murals covered the walls. Children's laughter spilled through open windows. This was what she'd come to Japan for, a better life for Maya, away from the violence and poverty that had defined Naomi's own childhood in Detroit. Some days, she almost believed she'd succeeded. "Mama!" Maya burst through the door, backpack bouncing, her cornrows decorated with colorful beads that clicked as she moved. At 6 years old, she still believed the world was safe, that her mother was invincible, that tomorrow would always come. Naomi caught her daughter and held on tight, breathing in the scent of crayons and apple juice. "How was school, baby?" "Good. We learned about butterflies, and I drew you one. See?" Maya thrust a crumpled paper into her hands. "It's got your favorite colors, purple and gold." The colors Naomi had worn on her wedding day, back when she still believed in happy endings. "It's beautiful," Naomi whispered, tucking the drawing carefully into her bag. "The most beautiful butterfly I've ever seen." They walked to the train, hand in hand, Maya chattering about her day while Naomi scanned the street with the hypervigilance of someone who'd learned that danger didn't always announce itself. Their neighborhood wasn't the worst in Tokyo, but it wasn't good either. The kind of place where police didn't patrol often, where people looked away when they heard shouting, where women like Naomi could disappear without anyone asking too many questions. Their apartment building loomed ahead, 6 stories of peeling paint and broken elevator buttons. Naomi's heart sank as she recognized the car parked out front, a black Mercedes. Expensive, out of place in this neighborhood. Takeshi's car. Mama, who's that man? Maya's hand tightened in hers. Takeshi Yamada leaned against his car like he owned the building, owned the street, owned them. He was in his early 40s, soft around the middle from too much good food and not enough honest work. His suit was nice, but not nice enough, the uniform of a man trying to look more important than he was. When he saw Naomi, he smiled. Naomi-san, right on time. He stubbed out his cigarette. We need to talk. I'm with my daughter. Naomi kept her voice steady, positioning herself between Maya and Takeshi. Whatever you need can wait until tomorrow. No. His smile never wavered. It really can't. He gestured toward the alley beside the building, the kind of gesture that wasn't a request. Naomi's stomach twisted. She'd been in that alley before. 3 days ago, when she'd refused to work an extra shift without pay. That was where Takeshi had grabbed her throat, where he'd promised that next time he wouldn't be so gentle, where he'd left the bruise that started all of this. Maya, baby, go upstairs. Naomi fumbled for her keys. Start on your homework, okay? I'll be right there. But Mama, now Maya. Something in Naomi's tone made her daughter obey. Maya took the keys and ran inside, looking back once with wide, worried eyes. The building door swung shut behind her. Takeshi's smile grew wider. Smart kid, knows when to run. He moved closer, and Naomi forced herself not to retreat. You've been talking to people, Naomi. Asking questions. Making noise. Naomi. Naomi, I haven't. Don't lie to me. His voice dropped to something cold and ugly. One of my contacts at immigration called me today. Said someone had been poking around in your file, checking your visa status. Now, why would someone do that unless you'd been talking? Majima. It had to be. Whatever investigation he'd started had already rippled out into places Naomi couldn't control. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Takeshi reached out and traced one finger along her bruised cheek. Naomi flinched but didn't pull away, couldn't. Not when he was blocking her path to the building. Because it seems to me like you're forgetting how things work. You belong to elite cleaning services. You belong to me. And when people start asking questions about my business, bad things happen. His hand moved to her throat, not squeezing yet, but promising. A warning. The money you owe me just went up. Double this week. His breath smelled like cigarettes and sake. And Naomi, if you even think about going to the police or talking to whoever's been sniffing around your file, I'll make sure Maya ends up in a state facility while they sort out your visa irregularities. You understand? Naomi understood perfectly. This was the trap she lived in, too afraid to ask for help, too desperate to run. Caught between a man who hurt her and a system that would take her daughter away if she made one wrong move. I understand, she whispered. Good girl. Takeshi patted her cheek, right over the bruise he'd left. I'll see you tomorrow. And Naomi, wear something that covers better. You're starting to look unprofessional. He climbed into his Mercedes and drove away, leaving Naomi shaking in the gathering dusk. She made it inside, up 3 flights of stairs, and through her apartment door before the tears came. Maya looked up from her homework, saw her mother's face, and ran to wrap small arms around Naomi's waist. It's okay, Mama, don't cry. But it wasn't okay. The debt had doubled. Takeshi knew someone was investigating, and Goro Majima, the most dangerous man in Tokyo, had somehow inserted himself into her life without asking, without understanding that his kind of attention only made things worse. Naomi held her daughter and stared at their tiny apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the second-hand furniture, the single window that looked out at nothing, and wondered how much longer she could keep pretending they were safe. Outside, 3 stories down and across the street, a man in a dark car watched their window with careful attention. He took note of the Mercedes that had just left, the license plate, the description of the driver. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. Nishida-san, you were right. Yamada just left her building, and from the way she looked when she came inside. The man paused, choosing his words carefully. The Oyabun isn't going to like this. In his penthouse across the city, Goro Majima read the text message that followed and felt something cold settle into his bones. It was time to pay Takeshi Yamada a visit, and this time, there would be no more watching from the shadows. Majima waited 3 days before making his move. 3 days of reports from Nishida. 3 days of surveillance footage showing Naomi working herself to exhaustion, Takeshi circling like a predator, and a little girl who deserved better than the fear Majima saw in her mother's eyes. 3 days of restraint that cost him more than most business negotiations. But patience was a weapon he'd mastered long ago. On the 4th day, he showed up at her apartment. It was early evening, that twilight hour when Tokyo transformed from business capital to neon wonderland. Majima stood outside her building in casual clothes, dark jeans, black shirt, leather jacket, looking nothing like the suited businessman who ruled boardrooms. He'd left his security detail behind. Whatever this conversation would be, he needed her to see him as something other than a threat, even if that's exactly what he was. He pressed the button for apartment 3B. Static crackled through the intercom. Then Naomi's voice, wary. "Yes, Miss Brooks, it's Majima. We need to talk." The silence stretched so long he thought she might not answer. Then, "How did you find my address?" "The same way I found everything else." He kept his tone neutral. "I can explain downstairs, or come up. Your choice." More silence. Finally, the door buzzed open. Majima climbed the stairs, noting the broken light on the 2nd floor, the graffiti on the walls, the way this entire building radiated neglect. This was where she lived while cleaning his penthouse, while watching her daughter alone, while paying Takeshi Yamada protection money she didn't owe. The wrongness of it settled into his chest like broken glass. Naomi waited in her doorway, arms crossed defensively. She'd changed from work clothes into sweatpants and an oversized shirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without makeup, without the mask she wore to work, she looked younger, exhausted. And the bruise on her face had bloomed into full technicolor, purple, yellow, green, a map of violence she couldn't hide anymore. "You can't be here," she said without preamble. "My daughter is inside. I know." Maya, age 6, attends Sakura daycare, loves butterflies. Majima saw her face go pale. "I told you, Miss Brooks, I know everything. The question is what we're going to do about it." "We?" Her voice cracked on the word. "There is no we. You're my employer. That's it. Whatever investigation you started, whatever you think you're doing, stop, please. You're making everything worse. Yamada doubled your debt." It wasn't a question. Naomi's sharp intake of breath confirmed what his surveillance team had reported. "How?" She stopped, shook her head. "Of course you know. You probably know what I had for breakfast too. Toast. Black coffee. Nothing else, because you gave the eggs to your daughter." Majima watched her process this, saw the moment fear shifted into something closer to anger. Good. Anger was better than resignation. You work 3 jobs and skip meals. Maya needs new winter clothes, but you haven't bought them because Yamada takes half your wages before you even see them. And 3 days ago, he threatened to have your daughter taken away if you don't comply. "Stop." Naomi's hands shook. "Just stop talking. You don't know anything about my life. I know you're trapped. I know Yamada is using your visa status as leverage, even though your paperwork is completely legitimate. I know he put those bruises on your face." Majima took 1 step closer, keeping his voice low and controlled. "And I know that if someone doesn't intervene, this ends with you or your daughter seriously hurt." "Someone like you?" Naomi laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think I don't know what you are? The demon of Kamurocho. Everyone knows your reputation, Majima-san. You're Yakuza. You're exactly the kind of man I've spent my entire life trying to avoid." The words landed like physical blows, but Majima didn't flinch. "You're right. I am exactly that kind of man." He met her eyes steadily. which means I'm the only kind of man who can make Takeshi Yamada disappear without consequences. One word from me and he never touches you again. Never threatens Maya again. Never takes another yen he hasn't earned. And what do you want in return? Naomi's voice turned bitter. Because men like you don't offer help without a price. What is it? You want me to? Nothing. The word came out harder than he intended. I want nothing from you, except the truth. Tell me what's happening. All of it. And I'll fix it. Why? She searched his face, desperate for an answer that made sense. Why do you care? I'm nobody. I clean your floors. That's it. Why indeed? Majima had asked himself the same question 100 times in 3 days. The logical answer that Yamada's operation threatened the order Majima maintained, that exploitation of workers invited police attention he didn't need, felt hollow even as he thought it. The truth was something else entirely, something he barely recognized in himself. Mama? Both of them turned. A little girl stood in the doorway, Maya, with her beaded braids and careful eyes. She looked at Majima with the kind of assessment that belonged to children who'd learned too early to measure threats. Who's this? She asked her mother. Naomi's entire demeanor shifted, softening into something protective and fierce. This is someone from work, baby. Go back inside. I'll be there in a minute. Is he the reason you've been sad? The question hit Majima unexpectedly. He'd been called many things in his life, monster, demon, the devil himself, but he'd never been someone's reason for sadness, never wanted to be. No, Naomi said softly. He's not. Go on, sweetheart. Maya disappeared back inside, but not before giving Majima one last measuring look. The door clicked shut behind her. You need to leave. Naomi's voice was raw now, stripped of pretense. Whatever you think you're offering, I can't accept it. Men like Yamada, they're predictable. I know how to survive them. But you, she shook her head. Your kind of help comes with strings I can't see until they're already wrapped around my throat. I won't risk my daughter for that. I'm not Yamada. No, you're worse. She said it plainly, without malice. Because he's just a thug playing dress-up. You're the real thing. And the real thing? That's terrifying. Majima should have expected this. Should have known that his reputation, carefully built over 15 years, would make trust impossible. But hearing it from her, seeing genuine fear in her eyes when she looked at him, felt like standing in a wound he didn't know he had. You're right to be afraid of me, he said quietly. I've done things that would keep you awake at night. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, built an empire on fear and blood. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But I have never hurt someone who didn't deserve it, and I have never threatened a child. That's supposed to comfort me. No, it's supposed to be the truth. Majima reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, plain white. Just a phone number, no name. This is my personal line. If Yamada comes near you or Maya again, call me, day or night. I'll handle it. Naomi stared at the card like it was a poisonous snake. And if I don't call, if I just keep going the way I have been, then I'll watch him destroy you piece by piece until there's nothing left. Majima's voice hardened, because that's what men like Yamada do. They take and take until you're empty, until you're so beaten down you forget what it felt like to stand up straight. He saw the truth of his words land in her expression, the recognition of someone who was already halfway there. Take the card, Miss Brooks. You don't have to call. You don't have to trust me. But when things get worse, and they will get worse, you'll have an option. He set the card on the railing beside her door and turned to leave. He'd made it 3 steps when her voice stopped him. Why that day? Majima looked back. What? The bandage. You see me every week for months and never say a word. Never even look at me twice. Then one day, one stupid bandage, and suddenly you're investigating my life. Stalking me. Offering to. Her voice broke. Why that day? What changed? Majima thought about lying, thought about giving her the logical answer about maintaining order, about Yamada crossing lines that threatened his business interests. But standing there in her shabby hallway, with her daughter on the other side of that door, and bruises marking her face, he couldn't. You flinched, he said simply. You took a step back from me, like I was the one who hurt you. And I realized someone had made you so afraid that you couldn't tell the difference between a man who would protect you and a man who would hurt you. He held her gaze. That's what changed. The moment I understood what fear like that costs. Naomi's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I don't know how to trust you. Then don't. Not yet. Majima continued down the stairs, his voice echoing in the stairwell. But keep the card anyway. He left her standing there, the white card bright against the dingy railing, and walked out into the Tokyo night feeling more human and more monstrous than he had in years. Naomi noticed the first car on Tuesday. A dark sedan, parked across from Maya's daycare. The same sedan she'd seen outside the ramen shop during her lunch shift. Different drivers, but the same careful attention. The same way they didn't quite look at her while clearly watching everything she did. By Wednesday, she'd spotted 3 more. 1 outside her apartment building. 1 at the train station she used every morning. 1 idling near the office building where she worked her night shift. Always different cars. Always different men. But all carrying the same quality. Professional. Patient. Expensive. Majima's men. Had to be. Thursday morning. Naomi stood in his penthouse kitchen, hands gripping the edge of the marble counter so hard her knuckles went white. He wasn't supposed to be here. His schedule had him in Osaka for business meetings, but she'd heard the elevator 20 minutes ago, heard his footsteps in the bedroom, and now she was trying to decide if she was angry enough to confront a Yakuza boss in his own home. The decision was made for her when Majima emerged, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual rent. Miss Brooks. Early as always. We need to talk. The words came out harder than she'd intended, fueled by 4 days of paranoia and sleepless nights. Call off your dogs. Majima paused in the act of adjusting his cufflinks. I'm not sure I understand. I'm not sure. I understand. Yes, you do. Naomi turned to face him fully, past caring about deference or job security. The men watching me, following me, parked outside my daughter's daycare like I'm some kind of criminal under surveillance. I told you I didn't want your help. That means I don't want your protection or your stalkers or whatever you want to call it. Something flickered across Majima's expression, surprise. Maybe. That she'd noticed. Or perhaps satisfaction that his men were obvious enough to send a message. They're there for your safety. No. Naomi's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. They're there because you decided what I need without asking. Because you think you know better than me how to live my life. I know Yamada visited you again yesterday. Majima's tone remained infuriatingly level. I know he grabbed your arm hard enough to leave bruises. I know he threatened to come by when Maya was home alone if you didn't produce an extra 100,000 yen by Friday. The accuracy of it stole her breath. Takeshi had cornered her in the alley again, his fingers digging into her bicep while he spelled out exactly what would happen if she didn't find the money. She'd worn long sleeves to hide the fingerprint bruises, had checked the locks on her apartment 3 times last night, had barely slept wondering if he'd make good on his threat, and Majima knew. All of it. How? She stopped, shook her head. Right. The surveillance. Your men reported back like I'm some kind of project. Do they film me too? Take notes on everything I say? They're there to document threats against you, to ensure no one hurts you or your daughter. Majima moved closer, his voice dropping into something almost gentle. Naomi, Yamada is escalating. The pattern is clear. First verbal threats, then physical intimidation, now direct threats against Maya. This is how men like him operate. They push boundaries until something breaks. So you put me in a cage to keep me safe? She laughed bitterly. Do you know what it's like? Walking down the street knowing someone is always watching? Wondering if the person behind you on the train is one of yours or one of Takeshi's? Having to explain to your 6-year-old why strange men are parked outside her school? That last part landed. Majima's jaw tightened. Maya saw them. Of course she saw them. She's scared, Majima-san. She thinks we're in danger. She asked me last night if we need to run away, if the bad men are coming for us. Naomi's voice cracked. I came to Japan to give her a better life, to keep her safe. And now she's terrified because you decided to play protector without considering what that protection looks like from the inside. Majima was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge she'd never heard before, something raw beneath the usual control. 2 years ago, a woman came to me. Her husband was involved in a territorial dispute with a rival family. I told her I'd handle it, that she should go home and wait. I gave her the same speech about protection and safety. He paused, looking past Naomi at something she couldn't see. 3 days later, her husband's enemies killed her because I'd waited too long to act, because I'd tried to handle things quietly, carefully. She died in a parking garage while I was still gathering information. The story hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. I'm sorry that happened, Naomi said carefully, but I'm not her. And this isn't the same situation, isn't it? Majima's eyes locked onto hers with disturbing intensity. Yamada has connections to the Matsuda Gumi. Small-time Yakuza, with big ambitions and no code. The kind of men who see women and children as leverage, not people. You think I'm overreacting? I think I'm barely reacting fast enough. That's not your decision to make. Frustration boiled over into anger. You want to know the difference between you and Takeshi? He takes my choices away with threats and violence. You take them away with money and power, and telling yourself it's for my own good. But either way, I end up with no control over my own life. The words hit harder than she'd intended. Majima actually stepped back. Something like shock, registering on his features. You think I'm the same as him? I think you're both men who've decided what's best for me without asking what I want. Naomi's hands trembled, but she pressed on. I know you think you're helping. Maybe you even are. But help that comes with surveillance and decisions made behind my back and men following my daughter to school. That's not protection. That's control. Silence fell between them, tense and brittle. Majima looked at her like she'd physically struck him, and maybe, in a way, she had. She'd drawn a line between him and the predator he was supposedly protecting her from, and it clearly landed in a place he didn't expect. What do you want me to do? His voice was quiet now, stripped of its usual authority. Seriously, tell me what you want, and I'll do it. It was the first time he'd asked instead of told. The first time he'd offered her actual agency instead of assumption. And it completely disarmed her anger. I want. Naomi exhaled slowly, trying to organize thoughts that had been chaos for days. I want you to pull back. Not completely. I'm not stupid enough to think Takeshi isn't dangerous, but I need breathing room. No more men outside Maya's school. No more following me to work. If something happens, if he threatens us directly, then yes, intervene. But until then, let me live my life. And if until then means he hurts you again, Majima asked. If waiting means I'm too late, then that's my risk to take. She held his gaze steadily. My choice, not yours. Majima studied her for what felt like an eternity. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, control versus respect, protection versus autonomy, the ingrained habit of making decisions for others against the unfamiliar terrain of actually listening. Finally, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Nishida, pull the daycare detail and the residential surveillance. Keep one car on rotation, minimum distance, intervention only if there's immediate danger. He paused, listening. No, I'm aware of the risks. Do it anyway. He ended the call, and looked at Naomi. Reduced surveillance. One car at a distance. They won't approach unless Yamada or his associates present a clear threat. His voice hardened. But Naomi, you keep that card I gave you, and if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. That's not negotiable. It wasn't perfect. It was still more surveillance than she wanted. Still his men in her orbit without her full consent. But it was compromise. It was him listening, adjusting, giving her back some measure of control. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. Majima nodded once, then checked his watch. I need to leave for the airport. The penthouse is yours for the rest of the day. He walked past her toward the elevator, then stopped at the threshold. For what it's worth, he said without turning around. You're right. I've been treating this like a problem to solve instead of a person to listen to. That won't happen again. Then he was gone, leaving Naomi alone in the vast penthouse with its cold perfection and expensive emptiness. She looked around at the space she cleaned every week, this monument to wealth and power and isolation, and wondered if Goro Majima had ever had anyone in his life brave enough to tell him no. She suspected the answer was no, and she suspected that's exactly why he kept coming back to her. The call came at 4:47 p.m. on Friday. Naomi was in the middle of her shift at the ramen shop, balancing 3 bowls on a tray, when her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. She ignored it, customers first, always, but then it rang again, and again. Naomi-san, you should answer that, Hiroshi said, concern creasing his young face. She set down the tray with shaking hands and pulled out her phone. Unknown number, but something in her gut twisted with premonition. Hello? Miss Brooks? This is Tanaka-sensei from Sakura Daycare. The teacher's voice was strained, trying for calm and failing. There's been an incident. A man came to pick up Maya. He said he was a family friend, that you'd sent him. But when we asked Maya, she didn't know him. We didn't release her. But he became aggressive. He's gone now, but I think you should come immediately. The world tilted sideways. Is Maya okay? Is she hurt? She's fine, just frightened. But Miss Brooks, this man knew your name, knew Maya's schedule. He had a photo of her. This wasn't random. Naomi was already untying her apron, already moving toward the door. I'm coming now. Don't let her out of your sight. Don't let anyone. We've locked the doors. She's safe. Just hurry. The train ride took 17 minutes that felt like 17 hours. Naomi's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pulled out Majima's card, had kept it in her wallet despite everything, despite telling herself she'd never use it, and stared at the number. A man came to pick up Maya. Takeshi. It had to be Takeshi, making good on his threat, pushing past intimidation into something far more dangerous. And Majima had reduced the surveillance at her request, had pulled back his protection because she'd demanded autonomy. This was her fault. Her phone rang again. Different number, but somehow she knew. Miss Brooks. Majima's voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested violence barely leashed. Where are you? How did you? My man was outside the daycare on rotation. He saw what happened, intervened, and Yamada's associate ran. Where are you? On the train. Shibuya Station, 5 minutes out. Naomi pressed her free hand against her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. He tried to take her. Majima. He tried to take my daughter. I know. Listen to me carefully. Maya is safe. The daycare is secure. I'm sending a car to the station to pick you up, black Mercedes. License plate Pintron, 301. Don't get in any other vehicle. Nishida will be driving. I don't need Naomi. Her name on his lips stopped her cold. Not Miss Brooks, not formal distance. Just her name, raw with something she couldn't identify. Please, let me help. She closed her eyes, feeling every wall she'd built crumbling under the weight of sheer terror. Okay. The Mercedes was waiting when she stumbled off the train, and Nishida, an older man with kind eyes that didn't match his Yakuza bearing, opened the door without a word. They reached the daycare in 8 minutes. traffic parting before them like Nishida was driving something more than a car. Majima stood outside the building in full daylight, surrounded by 4 men in dark suits, looking every inch the dangerous criminal he was. Parents picking up their children gave him a wide berth, hushing their kids and hurrying past. But when Naomi emerged from the car, his entire posture shifted. She's inside with Tanaka-sensei, unharmed. Naomi didn't wait for more. She ran past him, through the doors, following the sound of crying to the director's office, where Maya sat wrapped in a blanket despite the warm afternoon. Her daughter's face was streaked with tears, her braids disheveled, and the sight broke something in Naomi's chest. "Mama!" Maya launched herself across the room. Naomi caught her, sank to her knees, and held on like she could physically shield her daughter from every bad thing in the world. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're safe." "The man said he knew you," Maya sobbed into her shoulder. "He said you sent him, but I didn't know him, Mama." His face was mean. "You did exactly right, sweetheart. You were so brave." Naomi pulled back just enough to check her daughter over. No bruises, no injuries, just fear. "Did he touch you?" "No. Miss Tanaka wouldn't let him." And then the other man came, the one from outside school, and the mean man ran away. Majima's surveillance. The detail she'd asked him to reduce. If that man hadn't been there, if he'd been pulled completely like she'd initially wanted, Naomi couldn't finish the thought. Tanaka-sensei appeared in the doorway, her professional composure cracked. "Miss Brooks, I'm so sorry." He had identification, seemed legitimate. "If Maya hadn't spoken up, it's not your fault." Naomi stood, lifting Maya with her, even though her daughter was getting too big to carry easily. "Thank you for keeping her safe. The police are on their way. They'll want a statement." Naomi's stomach dropped. Police meant questions. Questions meant potentially revealing her visa status, her connection to elite cleaning services, the whole web of vulnerability Takeshi had been exploiting. But what choice did she have? Someone had tried to kidnap her daughter. "Miss Brooks?" Majima's voice from the hallway, careful and measured. "May I speak with you?" She found him standing apart from his men, hands in his pockets, looking less like a Yakuza boss and more like someone fighting very hard to maintain control. When he saw Maya clinging to her mother, something raw flashed across his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I pulled back the security, and this happened. That's on me." "No." Naomi adjusted Maya's weight on her hip. "I asked you to pull back. This is what I chose. A choice made without full information isn't a real choice." Majima's voice was gentle but firm. "I should have explained the risks better. Made you understand what Yamada is capable of." Maya lifted her head from Naomi's shoulder and studied Majima with the intensity only children possess. "Are you the man from outside our apartment?" "Mama said you work with her." "Yes. My name is Majima. Did you send the nice man who chased the bad man away?" "I did." Maya nodded slowly, processing. "Then thank you. Mama says we always thank people who help us." The simplicity of it, a child's gratitude amid chaos, seemed to affect Majima more than anything else had. He crouched down to Maya's eye level, a gesture that looked foreign on him, like he wasn't sure how to interact with someone so small. "You're very brave," he told her. "And very smart for not going with someone you didn't know. Your mother should be proud." "She is." Maya said it with complete confidence. "She tells me every day." Naomi felt tears threatening again. "Maya, baby, can you sit with Miss Tanaka for just a minute? I need to talk to Mr. Majima." Once Maya was settled back in the office, Naomi turned to face him. They stood in the hallway, his men at a respectful distance, and for the first time since all of this began, she felt the full weight of what was happening. "He's not going to stop," she said flatly. "Is he?" "No. This was a power play. When intimidation failed, he escalated to taking what matters most to you. It's textbook predator behavior. So what do I do? Go to the police? They'll investigate me as much as him. My visa is legal, but Takeshi has friends who can make things look suspicious. I could lose Maya anyway, just through a different system. Or Majima said carefully. You let me handle it. Handle it how? But she already knew. Could see it, in the cold calculation behind his eyes, the way his men stood ready for orders that would end with Takeshi Yamada disappearing into Tokyo Bay, or a shallow grave, or simply ceasing to exist. The way men like me handle threats to people under our protection. I'm not under your protection, aren't you? He gestured back toward the office where Maya sat. The moment my man intercepted Yamada's associate, you became part of my world whether you wanted to or not. The moment I made calls, pulled strings, put surveillance on you, I involved you. There's no going back from that. The truth of it settled heavy in Naomi's chest. She'd wanted to handle this herself, to maintain control of her life and choices. But Takeshi had escalated past the point where her choices mattered. He'd brought this to her daughter's school in broad daylight. He'd crossed every line that existed. If you handle him, she said slowly, people will know it was you. Won't that cause problems? Gang wars or police attention or whatever it is you people worry about? Something like respect flickered across Majima's face. Let me worry about the consequences. You worry about keeping Maya safe. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Naomi had maybe 2 minutes to decide. Trust the system that had never protected women like her, or trust the monster offering his hand. She pulled out his card, the white rectangle she'd carried like a talisman against disaster. If I do this, if I let you handle Takeshi, I need to know what happens after. I need to know what I'm agreeing to. Majima met her eyes steadily. After, you and Maya are safe. Yamada and anyone connected to this attempt are handled permanently. You find new employment, better housing. Live your life without looking over your shoulder. And you? What do you get? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a long moment. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried something unguarded. The chance to do something right. To protect someone who deserves it. Instead of, he trailed off. Does it matter? It did. It mattered more than she wanted to admit. The police cars pulled up outside. Decision time. Naomi looked back at the office where her daughter waited, small and scared and trusting her mother to fix this. Then she looked at Majima, dangerous, powerful, offering solutions she'd never wanted to accept. Handle it, she said. But Majima, after this is over, we talk. Really talk, about what comes next. His expression shifted into something she couldn't read. Agreed. As the police entered the building, Majima's hand brushed hers, barely contact, just enough to ground her. Then he was gone, melting into the crowd with his men, leaving Naomi to give her statement and pretend she didn't know exactly what kind of storm she'd just unleashed. Majima came to her apartment at midnight. Naomi had spent the evening with Maya dinner, bath time, an extra-long bedtime story to chase away the fear. Her daughter had finally fallen asleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, and Naomi had been staring at the ceiling, too wired to rest, when the knock came. Soft, deliberate, the knock of someone who knew exactly how thin her walls were. She checked the peephole and found Majima standing in the dingy hallway, still wearing the same clothes from earlier but somehow looking more disheveled. His shirt was untucked, his tie gone, and there was something in his expression that looked almost haunted. Naomi opened the door. It's done, he said without preamble. Yamada won't be a problem anymore. Neither will his associates. The words should have brought relief. Instead, they settled like lead in her stomach. What does done mean? It means what you think it means. His voice was flat, empty of the usual control. I didn't come here to discuss details. I came to make sure you and Maya are safe, that you're okay. At midnight, I couldn't wait until morning. He said it simply, like it was obvious. May I come in? Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea. Midnight visits from Yakuza bosses didn't end well in any story she knew, but she stepped back anyway. Let him into her small world of second-hand furniture and peeling wallpaper. Majima moved through her apartment like he was cataloging weaknesses, checking the window locks, testing the door chain, noting the fire escape access. When he finally stopped, he stood in her tiny living room looking completely out of place. This expensive, dangerous man in her shabby, safe space. You need better locks. This building's security is a joke. I know. Naomi crossed her arms, suddenly aware she was wearing old sweatpants and one of Maya's oversized t-shirts. I can't afford better. I'll have someone install. No. The word came out sharper than intended. Majima. You can't keep fixing things without asking. We talked about this. I eliminated a threat to your daughter. His voice rose slightly, the first crack in his composure. I think new locks are reasonable. Reasonable? Naomi laughed, but there was no humor in it. You killed someone for me today. Maybe multiple someones. You crossed a line you can't uncross, and you did it because I asked you to. That's not reasonable. That's insane. He tried to take Maya. Majima's eyes went cold. What did you expect me to do? File a police report? Men like Yamada don't stop because of paperwork. They stop when stopping becomes their only option. I know. I know what I asked you to do. I know what you did. Naomi pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to process everything. But you can't just show up at midnight and casually mention you've committed murder and then offer to install locks like we're talking about home improvement. Silence fell between them, heavy and complicated. I'm not good at this, Majima said finally, his voice quieter now. Normal conversation, asking instead of directing. Being around people who aren't afraid of me or trying to use me. He looked at her directly. But I'm trying. Because you asked me to. Because you matter. The admission hung in the air like something fragile and dangerous. Why? Naomi dropped her hands. Why do I matter? You have an empire. Money. Power. Respect. Fear. What could a broke cleaning woman with a kid possibly offer someone like you? Honesty. The answer came immediately. You're the first person in 15 years who's told me I'm wrong, who's looked at what I am and refused to be impressed or terrified into compliance. You see me, really see me, and you still treat me like a person instead of a weapon. He moved closer, and Naomi's breath caught. Everyone in my life wants something, he continued. Loyalty, protection, money, power. They smile and bow and say what they think I want to hear. But you, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. You told me I was no different than the man abusing you. You demanded I respect your choices even when you knew I could destroy your life with a phone call. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both, Naomi whispered. Probably. He was close enough now that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight he carried. I came here tonight because I needed to see for myself that you're safe, that what I did, what I am, didn't make things worse, that you don't look at me the way everyone else does. How do they look at you? Like I'm a monster. Naomi thought about that, about the violence he represented, the lives he'd ended, the empire built on fear and blood. She should be terrified, should be pushing him away, protecting Maya from the danger he embodied. But when she looked at him now, she didn't see the demon of Kamurocho. She saw a man who'd dropped everything to protect a child he didn't know, who'd listened when she said no, who'd crossed lines today that would haunt him because she'd asked him to. I don't think you're a monster, she said carefully. I think you're a man who does monstrous things. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. She held his gaze. Monsters don't feel guilt. They don't show up at midnight to make sure a woman and her daughter are safe. They don't ask for honesty or care when someone tells them no. Something shifted in Majima's expression, relief maybe, or something deeper. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and brushed his fingers against her bruised cheek. The touch was impossibly gentle from hands she knew were capable of terrible things. These are almost healed. Makeup helps. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. And time. You shouldn't have to hide bruises, shouldn't have to work 3 jobs, shouldn't have to be afraid. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. You deserve better than this. Better than what? This apartment? This life? She didn't pull away from his touch. Or better than you. All of it. Especially me. That's not your choice to make. Naomi surprised herself with the words. You don't get to decide what I deserve or what I can handle. That's the whole point. Majima. My life. My choices. Even if those choices are dangerous. Especially then. They were so close now, she could feel the heat radiating off him. Could see the war happening behind his eyes. He was a man used to taking what he wanted. Used to control and dominance and having every decision be his to make. But he held himself perfectly still, waiting for permission he'd never needed before. Naomi made the choice for both of them. She closed the distance and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like neither of them quite believed it was happening. Then Majima's hand curved around the back of her neck and everything shifted deeper, desperate. 15 years of isolation meeting 4 years of survival in one perfect collision. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Naomi rested her forehead against his chest. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. The worst. His voice rumbled against her ear. I'm everything you should avoid. Dangerous, criminal, incapable of normal relationships. I'm a single mother with trust issues and a stalker ex-employer you just murdered. We're a disaster. Completely. Neither of them moved away. Naomi. Her name was a question, a plea, a promise. I can't be normal. Can't give you the life you deserve. White picket fence. Stability. Someone Maya can look up to. My world is violence and shadows. If you let me in, that becomes your world too. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Really look at him past the expensive clothes and dangerous reputation to the man underneath who'd somehow become essential in the space of a week. I didn't come to Japan looking for normal. I came looking for safe, for a chance. She touched his face, feeling stubble rough against her palm. Maybe you can't give me white picket fences, but you can give me honest. You can give me someone who sees me, who fights for Maya, who asks instead of demands. That's worth more than normal. You're sure? He searched her eyes. Because once this line is crossed, I won't be able to uncross it. You'll be mine to protect. And I protect what's mine with everything I have. The possessiveness should have scared her. Instead, it felt like safety after years of drowning. I'm sure. She kissed him again, softer this time. But Majima, we do this my way. No more surveillance without asking. No more decisions made behind my back. If we're doing this, whatever this is, we do it as partners. Partners. He tested the word like it was foreign. I've never had a partner. Then we'll figure it out together. He smiled, then a real smile that transformed his entire face, making him look younger and infinitely more dangerous because now she could see the man behind the mask. Together, he agreed. I can work with that. Outside, Tokyo hummed with midnight life. Inside Naomi's small apartment, two broken people found something that looked like hope in each other's damaged edges. It wasn't normal. It wasn't safe. It probably wasn't even smart, but it was theirs. And for now, that was enough. The summons came 3 days after Takeshi Yamada disappeared. Majima sat in his penthouse at dawn, coffee cooling in his hand, reading the text from his oyabun, the head of the family he'd served for 15 years. 4 words that carried the weight of judgment. We need to talk. He'd known this was coming. You didn't eliminate a man with connections to another family, even a minor one like the Matsuda Gumi, without consequences. The old rules still applied. Territory. Respect. The careful balance of power that kept Tokyo's underworld from descending into open warfare. He'd broken those rules for a woman and her daughter, and he'd do it again without hesitation. Nishida appeared in the doorway, face grave. The car is ready, Oyabun. Kurosawa-san is waiting at the headquarters. I know. Majima set down his cup with deliberate care. Status on Naomi and Maya? Safe. New apartment in Meguro. Security system installed. Enrollment at Maya's new school finalized. The cleaning agency job has been terminated. We placed her with a legitimate property management company. Better pay, benefits, legal protections. Nishida paused. Majima's chest tightened. 3 days since that midnight kiss, and he deliberately kept his distance while his men moved her to safety, giving her space to process, giving himself time to handle the fallout before it touched her. What did she say? That you're an idiot if you think she doesn't know you're avoiding her. A ghost of a smile crossed Nishida's weathered face, and that Maya wants to thank you personally for the new bed. Despite everything, Majima almost smiled. Of course, Naomi had seen through his careful distance. She always did. Tell her I'll call tonight. After the meeting. If there was an after. The drive to headquarters took 40 minutes through morning traffic. Majima watched Tokyo slide past the tinted windows, the city he'd fought for, bled for, built an empire within. Every street corner held a memory. Every district bore his fingerprints. This was his territory in all but name, carved out through 15 years of perfect calculation and ruthless efficiency. Now it might all unravel because he'd chosen one woman over the code. Kurosawa Takumi waited in the traditional meeting room, seated on the tatami mats with the kind of casual power that came from 30 years ruling Tokyo's shadows. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing a simple yukata that somehow looked more intimidating than any suit. Behind him, 3 senior lieutenants sat in judgment. Majima entered alone, bowed with perfect respect, and knelt across from his oyabun. Majima-kun. Kurosawa's voice was mild. Thank you for coming. Of course, Kurosawa-san. Tea? Without waiting for an answer, Kurosawa poured with practiced ceremony. The ritual was familiar, comforting even, but Majima knew what it really was. A prelude. A moment of civility before the reckoning. The Matsudagumi came to me yesterday, Kurosawa said conversationally. They're upset about Yamada Takeshi. Quite upset, actually. He was running their labor operations protection rackets, wage theft, immigrant exploitation, profitable business, despite being distasteful. Distasteful, Majima repeated carefully. That's one word for it. They want compensation. Or blood. Kurosawa sipped his tea. They're not particular about which. And what did you tell them? I told them I'd discuss it with the man responsible. The oyabun's eyes, sharp despite his age, fixed on Majima. So let's discuss it. Why did you eliminate Yamada without approval? Without even informing me of your intentions? Majima had prepared several answers. The political one about maintaining order. The practical one about Yamada's operation drawing police attention. The strategic one about the Matsudagumi's weakness, making them unworthy of consideration. He gave none of them. He tried to kidnap a 6-year-old girl. He abused her mother for months, wage theft, threats, physical violence. When I intervened, he escalated to targeting a child in broad daylight. Majima's voice was level, but steel ran through it. I don't regret eliminating him. I'd do it again tomorrow. Silence fell over the room. One of the lieutenants shifted uncomfortably. Another exchanged glances with his colleague. This wasn't how these meetings went. You didn't admit to breaking protocol. You didn't justify personal decisions with emotion. You certainly didn't admit you'd do it again. This woman, Kurosawa said slowly, she's important to you. It wasn't a question. Majima met his oyabun's gaze steadily. Yes, important enough to risk war with the Matsudagumi. Important enough to jeopardize 15 years of loyalty. Important enough that I'd burn it all down to keep her safe. The words came out quiet but absolute. I understand the position this puts you in, Kurosawa-san. I understand the code, but I won't apologize for protecting someone who needed protection. Another lieutenant spoke up, Saito, a hardliner who'd never liked Majima's rapid rise. This is about more than one woman. This is about respect, authority, the rules that keep us from chaos. If we let personal feelings override our obligations, What separates us from common thugs? Nothing, Majima said flatly. We are common thugs. We just dress better and pretend our violence has honor. He looked around the room. But even thugs can draw lines. Children should be one of those lines. Women who can't fight back should be another. Interesting philosophy, Kurosawa said. Inconvenient, but interesting. He set down his teacup. The Matsuda Gumi wants 2 million yen in compensation, or they want you delivered to them for discussion. They're flexible. 2 million was nothing. Pocket change for an organization their size. But the principle was everything paying them would be admission that Majima had been wrong, that Yamada's elimination had violated legitimate business interests. I'll pay it, Majima said. From my personal accounts. Not family funds. No. Kurosawa's voice carried absolute authority. You won't. Majima's blood went cold. If the family wouldn't pay, if they wouldn't back him, then the only other option was, I'll pay it, Kurosawa continued, because Yamada Takeshi was a piece of shit who brought unnecessary police attention to all our operations. His labor practices were investigated twice in the last year. He used threats against legal foreign workers, which drew immigration scrutiny. His attempt to kidnap a child in broad daylight could have exposed all of us. The Oyabun leaned forward slightly. You eliminated a problem, Majima-kun. You just did it for the wrong reasons. In the wrong way. Without proper authorization. That's what I'm angry about. Not that you did it, but that you acted alone. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. When did you stop trusting me to support you? The question hit like a physical blow. Majima realized with sudden clarity that he'd been operating from fear. Fear that asking for permission would be denied. Fear that involving the family would put Naomi at risk. Fear that his feelings for her made him weak. I didn't want to burden the family with personal problems. Personal problems. Kurosawa almost smiled. You've given us 15 years of perfect service. Built relationships that doubled our legitimate business. Maintained peace when others wanted war. And you think asking for help protecting someone you care about is a burden? Kurosawa-san, let me be clear. The Oyabun's voice hardened. What you did was reckless and violated protocol. It will not happen again. But the Matsuda Gumi will accept 2 million yen as compensation and be grateful I'm not expanding into their territory as punishment for one of their men targeting children. Understood? Nombre. Understood. Good. Kurosawa stood, signaling the meeting's end. Now, about this woman. When do I meet her? Majima blinked, thrown completely off balance. Meet her? She's important enough that you risked everything for her. Important enough that you're still avoiding my calls to move her to safety. Important enough that my best lieutenant is distracted and sloppy because he can't stop thinking about her. The Oyabun's expression was almost amused. Yes, Majima-kun, I want to meet the woman who finally made you human again. The other lieutenants were staring now. And Majima realized what this meant. Not just acceptance, but approval. Kurosawa wasn't just tolerating his relationship with Naomi, he was validating it, giving it weight and recognition within the family structure. She's not. Majima searched for words. She's not comfortable with our world, with what we are. Then make her comfortable, or step away from the family. Kurosawa's voice went gentle. But Majima, stop trying to keep your world separate. That's how good men break themselves. Integrate or isolate. Choose. As Majima left headquarters, Nishida waiting by the car, he pulled out his phone. Naomi answered on the second ring, finally calling me back. Or should I expect another 3 days of silence while you handle things? Her voice irritated, worried. Alive was the best thing he'd heard all morning. I'm done handling things alone, he said. What are you and Maya doing for dinner tonight? A pause. Then, carefully, are you asking us on a date? I'm asking if you want to meet my family. The real one. He watched Tokyo slide past, seeing it differently now. Fair warning, they're probably more intimidating than I am. Naomi laughed. Bright and unexpected. Impossible. Nothing's more intimidating than you showing up at midnight with that serious face. You kissed me anyway. I did. Her voice softened. And I'll do it again tonight after your scary family meeting. Maya wants to show you her new room. Something warm unfurled in Majima's chest, something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Maybe longer. I'll be there at 7. Majima? Naomi's voice stopped him before he could hang up. Whatever happened at that meeting, you're okay. More than okay. He meant it. I'm exactly where I need to be. For the first time in 15 years. Goro Majima wasn't choosing between duty and desire, family and feeling. He was choosing all of it, the complicated, messy, impossible integration of his worlds. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like victory.